Hi everyone, my name's Allison Powell and I'm a filmmaker living here in Los Angeles, California, and I wanted to talk to you today about locations, filming locations. And I'm specifically going to be talking about locations to avoid when you're working with really tiny micro budget projects. So if you're working on something that you're lucky enough to have a big, huge budget, feel free to keep watching and hopefully you'll learn something, but this video might not apply to you quite as much. So if you're working on a project that has a small budget, you don't want to be spending all of that money on locations because you want to be able to rent equipment, pay your crew, get lunch, get plenty of good food for Crafty. So it's good to know some locations to avoid when you're writing a script, or maybe some locations that you can set scenes in that will still work but won't be quite as expensive. And all the locations that I'm going to be talking about are pretty specific to Los Angeles. So if there is a difference in your area of the country and some locations are cheaper and easier to get there, please comment below and let me know so that we can help out other filmmakers here. So in LA, one of the top locations that is in a lot of scripts that is generally better to avoid is bars. Bars are really, really expensive to rent here for obvious reasons. They make a lot more money selling alcohol than they do renting to low budget productions. Also, bars are open almost all day, usually about 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. I know some of course don't open until 3 or 4 p.m., but then they are open until 2 a.m. So to get in a full 12-hour shooting day is really difficult. You're also asking people to come in earlier or to work overnight that are employees of the location, so it's usually just really, really expensive to get a bar. I have had some success finding a couple that are able to work with smaller productions and lower budgets, and a few sound stages that are bar specific. But generally, if you're writing the script and it can take place somewhere that's not a bar, maybe try for that. In a similar vein, restaurants and cafes are also really expensive. Cafes, again, because they're open almost all day. They open really early in the morning. So again, even if they close at 3 p.m., they've got to do the cleanup. They've got to get everybody out of there. It's hard to get in a 12-hour day at a working cafe, even if you're trying to get it in when they're not open. Sometimes they're open 20 hours or whatever. So it's hard to get in that 12-hour working slot that you need. One of my favorite locations that I always try to suggest to people is if you have a scene that takes place in a cafe usually, or a restaurant, maybe a bar would be a little more difficult, but you could make it work, is to reset it in a yoga studio. There's a lot of yoga studios here in LA, and a lot of them are not open as long hours as bars and cafes and restaurants, and also they tend to be a little more affordable to rent by the hour. There aren't classes every day. There's a lot of ones that are independently run, and so those are great places if two women, two friends are just chatting over a cup of coffee. Why can't they be chatting and packing up their yoga mats? That's a really, really good option. Some other locations to avoid here in LA is pretty much anything outside on the street or in a park, because you're gonna need a permit for that, and permits are really expensive to get. If you are a student, you can get a student film rate or a student film rate permit, and that will help a little bit. But I personally try to find locations that I can get without a permit, just to avoid that. But if you're outside, if you're in a park, if you're on the beach, if you're in any sort of public area, you're going to want to have a permit. So typically it's better to avoid those. Maybe shoot in a friend's backyard or somewhere that you can rent as part of a studio or a soundstage, but don't go filming in a park or out on the street. People will come after you and it will not be good. Another location that I see a lot that's important to avoid if you can is schools. Again, especially here in LA, the LA Unified School District is pretty strict about filming. It's very expensive to film in schools. Obviously, there's a lot of safety measures that they need to consider. So if you can reset it to take place somewhere that's not school or not a classroom, that's great. If you can set it just in a classroom, that might be a little bit easier to rent, because you could reach out to churches, charter schools, private schools. Somewhere that's a little bit easier to deal with permit-wise is going to be really helpful. But if you're writing a project that takes place absolutely in school, just know it's going to be a little difficult to find that location. So bars, restaurants, cafes, anything outside that's going to require a permit, and schools are pretty much the locations that you want to try to avoid when you're writing a script. However, anything is possible. You can always find a way to make something happen, but you're just gonna have to be a little bit flexible. I had a script that I wrote that had a scene that took place at a football game. That's a lot of things that you should try to avoid. That's outside, that's a school, that's a lot of extras, a lot of permits. So I rewrote the scene to take place in the parking lot before the game started. So we still had that atmosphere of a football game. We had people walking by. We were saying it was the tailgate, but we were able to rent a parking lot, which was a lot more affordable. So you can always get creative in your writing and make those sort of things happen. I hope that you found this video useful. And again, if you have any questions on locations or things are different in your area of the country, comment below and let us know. Thanks so much.